I messed up tonight. I lost another fight. I still mess up, but I'll just start again. I keep falling down. I keep on hitting the ground. I always get enough to see what's next. Birds don't just fly, they fall down and get up. Nobody learns without getting it wrong. I won't give up, no I won't give in till I reach the end and then I'll start again. No I won't leave, I wanna try everything, I wanna try even though I could fail.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Zootopia Minute, the minute-by-minute podcast where we review and analyze everyone's favorite award-winning animated film from 2016, Zootopia. I'm Choco, and I want to wish everyone out there a happy Veterans Day. We are recording this on the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. And I'm joined here with my special co-host. He's special because he's been on every single episode so far.
No, that's not true.
Except one.
I missed the live one at EQLA, yeah.
Yep. Which was actually around this time last year. But yes, my co-host Simul.
Hey guys, what's up? Hope you're all having a good one.
Yeah, I hope you guys have a good one. I just came back from a mini vacation in Pensacola in honor of the Marine Corps birthday and Veterans Day, but we'll probably talk about all that stuff, including the election after this minute, which is a very, very sad minute. We are at minute 59. That goes from 5900 to 5959. Hey, we can say that now, 5959.
Yeah.
Anyways, it continues off from the previous minute where Nick says, yeah, I was born ready, and it went all to black. We don't know what happened. It was a nice cliffhanger. Then we see a chipmunk shining a light on young Nick's face.
He's a woodchuck.
What's the difference between a woodchuck and a chipmunk?
Well, I don't know how much wood a chipmunk could chuck, if a chipmunk could chuck wood.
Isn't that
but a
from
woodchuck
Alvin
on the other
and the Chipmunks? Yeah, they sing Christmas songs, I forgot. Alright, so the lights go on, and we see the woodchuck boy shining a light on young Nick's face, and he says, okay, now raise your paw and deliver the oath. Young Nick says, I, Nicholas Wilde, promise to be brave, loyal, and trustworthy, in a very, very cute adorable voice. The chipmunk says, even though you're a fox. Dun, 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 dun.
Dun, dun.
Nick goes, what? And then he gets pummeled to the floor. He's like, no, please tell me what they do wrong. And all of a sudden, all the other cubs jump on him. They put a muzzle on him. And he runs out kind of crying after the chipmunk boy says, if you thought we could ever trust a fox without a muzzle, you're dumber than you look. Young Nick goes out there crying. One junior ranger scout says, is he going to cry? He breaks down crying in the street. And that's when the narrative Nick, the present Nick, or the future Nick from his perspective says, I learned two things that day. One, I was never going to let anyone see, and the minute ends.
Yep.
There we go. So that is minute 59:59.
What didn't he want them to see?
Yeah, what did he not want them to see? Well, I don't know. Those Cub Scouts could be very aggressive with their fraternity hazing.
They're junior rangers, not Cub Scouts.
They
They're
are
just
literal
like Cub
Cubs.
Scouts in every other way.
They are literal Cubs, and they're in a scouting program. They're freaking Cub Scouts, okay?
All right.
Speaking of which, there's that lawsuit going on. The Girl Scouts are suing the Boy Scouts. Oh,
Oh, man.
What's going to happen with that? So anyways, this was the minute I was telling you about that. This was the moment when I was watching with my dad that he just kind of he was liking the movie up to this point. Then he kind of got up and was like, okay, they're going too far.
Really?
Yeah, and because I think he watches enough movies to also understand all these tropes as well, where when he could see when they're purposely trying to pull at your heartstrings or tug at specific emotions, evoke specific emotions, and, you know, cramming all that on a young, cute little fox boy like Nick, yeah, it's going to really going to tug at the heartstrings, and when it's obvious, he likes to call this stuff out, like I did in my mind. I was like, oh, maybe it's a little too far.
You're right, yeah, because in the last episode you were saying some of it seems kind of forced, where it's like, this is the easiest way to give Nick some sort of a backstory, is just to pad it out with sympathy, basically.
Yeah, in almost every single kid's movie, when you want to have sympathy to a particular kid, you always have that one child get bullied. And the bullies are normally the most stereotypical one-dimensional bully characters. Their only job there is just to bully.
Right. The other example we've seen probably being Gideon Grey, who is a fox, actually, at the beginning of the movie. Judy.
Well, so I guess that goes into the quote-unquote, it's poetry, it rhymes, that Judy, when she was young, she was bullied by a fox. Nick, when he was young, he was bullied because he was a fox, so...
Hey, there's some symmetry.
Yeah.
Wow, look at those literary devices at work.
It's like poetry, it rhymes.
Yeah. All right. So let's dive into some of this dialogue in depth here and take a look at kind of what's happening here. So again, in the last minute is sort of Nick's introduction to what's going on. Remember, we're looking at a flashback of this story that he's telling Judy about his childhood after he had remarked to never let them see that they get to you. This is the story he's telling to her. So he was excited to join the Junior Rangers. His mom got him a nice new uniform. He heads down into this church basement or whatever it is and is so ready to join up. These kids seem welcoming at first, and now in this minute the tables have turned a bit. So first I want to look at this oath that young Nick is delivering here.
Okay.
He's raising his right paw to deliver it, and you'll notice he's actually doing the scout salute, where you put your thumb and pinky together and just hold your hand up, which is an homage to the actual Cub Scouts.
Yeah.
Although it's hard for me to tell. Does he have 4 digits, young Nick? I think so, right?
It looks like it.
What I know is like the normal scout salute, it's 3 fingers in the air with thumb and pinky touching. But if you're a Cub Scout, there is an alternative one where you do 2 fingers up.
Yes, it's the 2 fingers. So
which is supposed to look like wolf ears or something.
Wait, was it? I don't know. I was never in Cub Scouts.
I think that was part of it.
Know.
I feel like I remember that.
Because I know Wolf Scouts. So it started. What was it? Lion Scouts, and then Wolf Scouts was the highest one you could get to.
I think so. I think that's where I got up to.
Because I remember the Weebelows were the final one before you become a Boy Scout.
Full-fledged Boy Scout. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Weebelows were short for We Be Loyal Scouts.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, so you did mention that this was a flashback.
Yes.
Which was correct. We had to frame that in the context of a flashback, which means maybe he reimagined these bullies as being more aggressive than how they really were?
Right, kind of like how the wall is his shirt in the previous minute, right? His subconscious is filling in gaps.
Yeah.
Could be. Yeah, because that's the thing. Every time you remember something, you're really, it's more abstract than this in reality, but sometimes the way people describe it is every time you remember something, you're actually remembering the last time you remembered it.
Yeah, and it becomes more and more traumatic. It's like the telephone game. If you remember an event as traumatic, it'll be more and more traumatic. Okay, well, looking back at that specific scene and pausing it and then zooming in, you can actually see he does have 5 digits, and 2 are up, so he's doing...
So he's doing the 2-finger salute. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense for the younger kids. Cool. So I liked that. I like that they did an homage to, the actual Cub Scouts there. If you listen to the oath, it's not similar to the actual Cub Scout oath, but it does sound a lot like parts of the Scout Law, if you're familiar with that. So he says, I, Nicholas Wilde, promise to be brave, loyal, helpful, and trustworthy. And in the Scouts, the real Scouts, there is the Scout Law, which is basically just a list of traits that an exemplary Scout should have, which includes trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent.
Yes, I remember that. A Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, reverent. Boom!
Yes, I remember that too. Nostalgia.
So it's kind of interesting because they are obviously doing a homage to the Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts. But you notice every time you watch any fictional movie or TV show talking about the Scouts, they're never called Boy Scouts, because I'm not sure if the Boy Scouts are specifically litigious with their IP and copyrights and all that stuff. But I noticed there's never been actual Boy Scouts in any show. It's always like the Straight Arrow or the Campfire Scouts or whatever.
And also, I don't know, I could be wrong here, but to me, the Boy Scouts of America seems to operate almost like just a group of separate franchises almost, right? If you've got a church community or whatever, you can have just one guy in the church who says like, hey, I want to run a scouting pack. And then I think that's how it works. You get sort of sent a kit to start it up.
Yeah, I guess they do. You have to get a kit, but there's still specific guy laws and regulations. And I know because one of my brothers were in a scout where they were in Cub Scouts, and they had their Cub Scout master fired because I guess they were reporting on him for other stuff.
Right, but I guess what I mean to say is that it's not heavily centralized.
Well, they do have like the Scouting Jubilee and stuff, and then the Boy Scouts of America do have to report to the World Scouting Organization because the Boy Scouts started in Britain before, of course, it came over to America. And each scouting program around the world are associated with this World Scouting Organization. That's why they use the fleur-de-lis as their symbol.
Dude, there's got to be a conspiracy theory there, like a new world order type of thing.
Yeah, I'm sure there's been something. I'm sure you ask Joe Rogan. But no, the under the Boy Scouts BSA, so Boy Scouts in America is the main thing. They have the Cub Scouts, the Weebelows, the Boy Scouts, and the Venture Scouts. And now that actually it's just making the news like literally within the last 2 days. Now that they're branching out and actually being quote unquote gender inclusive or something, they're allowing females to join. The Girl Scouts are fighting back because there's fears that people in the public think that the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts merge, even though they're two separate organizations, and the Girl Scouts are arguing that's so infringing on their... Yeah, so it's ironic that normally the Boy Scouts who seem to be more litigious is now the Girl Scouts who are fighting back, so...
Yeah, well, don't want to get too into that, probably, but it is interesting to see the way that in this film they've created a pretty nice reflection of what actual scouting organizations are like, to a certain extent.
I like that their symbol is a pine tree, just like, your Great Republic of Cascadia.
Yeah. You know what? That's actually not a pine. It's a Douglas fir, okay?
Yeah, I know.
So
Douglas,
people say pine tree to talk about any conifer, but that's only like a few conifers are actual pine trees.
Okay, why is there no convention in the Northwest called conifer?
There was, I believe.
Oh, damn it. That was an idea I wanted. Never mind.
No, in fact, I'm fairly certain that was the one that Rainforest replaced.
Yeah, speaking of Rainforest replacement, as we're recording this right now, another furry con in your area, Antler Northwest, is taking place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thanks for bringing that up so we could bring up furry reference.
Yeah, we're not furries. Again, we're not furries.
Yeah.
All right. Well, like speeding back to this, so if we watch the previous minute, it seems like he's very friendly with these people. Like he went up to the zebra, they did like a paw and hoof high five, or bro hoof. So he seems very, very friendly with this group of kids. So this is where I would say it's either unrealistic and they had to kind of force it to get the story moving along, or it's his faulty memory. How did these pack of cubs turn from really, really nice, friendly, they obviously know Nick, acknowledge Nick as a friend, and yada, 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 and he seems to trust them, to all of a sudden being, we don't want you in here, go away, you smell, you're a predator.
Right, it's entrapment.
Yeah, especially, I know kids are mean, but I don't think they're that mean. They're not mean enough to put a muzzle on.
Oh, they can be. Although, okay, so yeah, let's kind of continue here with the narrative a little bit. So Nick delivers this oath. I, Nicholas Wilde, promise to be brave, loyal, helpful, and trustworthy. And he says this with such enthusiasm. Then the woodchuck, the kind of ringleader, says, even though you're a fox. And Nick is like, what? And his facial expression here changes. He's like really taken by surprise here. And then all these other scouts kind of pile on him and push him down on the ground, pin him down. And he's struggling. He's saying, no, please, what did I do wrong? And then the woodchuck boy puts a muzzle on him, and this to me is kind of like a callback to the original concept for the entire movie, isn't it?
Yeah,
right.
They had to squeeze an entire movie's worth of character building into a minute, literally.
Mm-hmm. But it is similar to Nick's original story in the original concept for the film with the shock collars and everything.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that's interesting. They were still able to keep it. Oftentimes, I think in movies like this, when ideas do get scrapped, oftentimes they'll still find ways to like keep little bits of it or pieces in it just for, maybe their own satisfaction, or I don't know. But it's just sort of interesting to see a bit of the fingerprints of the people that made this movie in this kind of scene with that kind of subtle reference, for sure.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about that when more of those references from the previous two versions of the movie pop up. So it is kind of interesting. One theory I have about why, so, being in military academy, also being in scouting and studying, group psychology, is the idea of peer pressure. And when the leader starts doing it, or the popular kid starts doing it, the other ones have to kind of go along with the pack. But in this case, it seems like it was kind of pre-rehearsed. They already knew exactly what they wanted to do to instantly tie him down, pin him down, and put the muzzle on him, so... Yeah.
Well, as this is happening, you sort of get a close-up of some of these other scouts here. The woodchuck kid is kind of front and center, looming over Nick. Something interesting I noticed, so I forget if there's a specific name for it, but the little metal thing that holds the neckerchief together in the middle, on these, it has an R in a circle, which I assume stands for Ranger, but to me, it's just like, this is Disney's registered trademark on this character. Just like, don't copy this woodchuck scout anywhere. This is R.I.P.
That's funny. I don't think I noticed that. Okay, I see it now. Yes.
Yeah.
I guess it could be Ranger, but yeah, no.
Wow, Disney, real subtle.
And I like how these cute little cubs, including the woodchuck, instantly turn from looking adorable to horrifying.
Kind of intimidating, yeah. You get a good look kind of into the woodchuck kid's mouth because he's like kind of grimacing almost. And he has these weird longish beaverish woodchuck kind of teeth. And I don't know if I'm seeing it right, but to me it looks like the woodchuck kid might have braces. There's like a horizontal line that seems to come across, and I can't tell if that's... I think it must be, because his lower jaw moves independent of it.
I mean, if he did have braces, that would be perfect. That would show that, hey, he's a young kid. Because most TV shows, there's always that one kid with braces, and he talks. He talks like he can't really, like a peanut butter on top of his mouth type situation.
Yeah. Did you ever have braces?
I did have braces, and they were horrible.
Yeah, they suck.
Did you have braces?
I had them for like the last 2 years of being in high school.
I had them for the first 2 years, so.
Yeah. Well, so I had a really severe overbite. So in addition to braces, I also had I forget. Oh, I remember what it's called. It was called a MARA. That's some sort of acronym. I forget what it stands for, but it was this thing that like had these metal posts coming out of the sides of like my rear molars, kind of. What it did is when you would bite down or when you would close your jaw, it would force your bottom jaw forwards. And the idea was that that would stimulate growth in your lower jaw, because that's basically what my overbite was. Is my mandible was underdeveloped, I suppose, and so this was a way to get it to come more forwards. But yeah, getting all that stuff off after years of having it on was just like, ugh. It was basically that image of Nick after he gets the shock collar off in the concept, where he's just rubbing his neck like, ugh. That was
But
me.
then, did you have to deal with the retainer?
Yep, I still use a retainer.
And I've been bad. I have not been using my retainer, and now I think mine have kind of become misaligned.
Well, that's the problem now is they can't, if you go back in now, they can't make a retainer based on what it should be. They can only make it based on what your mouth looks like right now.
Yeah.
So they can keep it from moving further, but they can't necessarily get it back to how it's supposed to be unless they put more braces in. And I have a friend who like recently got braces back in, but she's like, in her 20s now.
And speaking of, I guess, annoying mouthpieces that make you talk different, I kind of like that he has that Bane look now.
Right, yeah.
The only other movie I've probably seen more times in theaters than Zootopia was Dark Knight Rises. So I just love that.
Zootopia's reckoning.
Yeah, she just has that weird Bane. It kind of looks like the muzzle's like a Bane mask now on him.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
So this is a villain backstory.
It is a villain backstory.
Oh, this is our twist. Nick is actually going to turn out to be the villain of the whole movie. Oh, no.
It sounds like a typical Disney Pixar movie. Well, he started off as kind of the antagonist, so it wouldn't be a far stretch to make him the villain again.
And we have Judy, the protagonist.
All right. So
so first the woodchuck boy has a bit of dialogue. So they put this muzzle on Nick and he's struggling, and the woodchuck boy says, "If you thought we would ever trust a fox without a muzzle, you're even dumber than you look." And then Nick runs out of the building crying.
yeah, which is where I'm saying, where are the adults?
Yeah, honestly, that's the first red flag here. Like, you show up to take your scout oath, you're like, dude, where's the pack leader?
Yeah, I don't think his mother dropped him off because we saw him running there. No cars dropped him off. But if that building is open, there at least should be an adult somewhere, maybe on like the first floor or something. And she or he would see a young cub with a muzzle on his face. I think that would be alarming.
Yeah, maybe these kids literally broke into the basement off hours or something.
I don't think people break into buildings to do a Cub Scout thing. They would rather do it to have their own pirate secret treasure hunt club or something, not Cub Scouts.
I suppose so.
Yeah.
So our very last thing that we see in this minute is Nick has run outside. We hear from a distance another scout kind of teasing, "Oh, is he gonna cry?" And Nick runs out, kind of goes down the steps and around to the side of the stairs and just leans against the wall, gets the muzzle off of him, and then just slides down the wall crying. And then we get this slow zoom out with adult Nick in the present narrating, "I learned 2 things that day. 1, I was never gonna let anyone see." And then the minute ends. So we'll have to find out what he's not going to let anyone see in the next minute.
All right, that'll be interesting. So stay tuned for big episode 60.
Yes, finally the 60.
All right, so today is the 100th anniversary of World War One. Armistice Day Armistice Day, and it's known as Veterans Day here in America. Yesterday was the Marine Corps' 243rd birthday. My dad was in the Marine Corps, and so was my grandfather. So very big day. And yesterday I was actually at the Pensacola Naval Air Station Museum, where I got to see the Blue Angel. I didn't see the Blue Angel show, but I saw the Blue Angel planes on display. And and a bunch of other stuff. That's how I spent my Veterans Day weekend.
That's cool.
So what did you end up doing?
I haven't really done much this weekend. I have a big giant work thing tomorrow, actually. So this whole last week for me has been like super busy with my day job. But it is nice to have a little bit of the time off. Yeah, it's crazy to me to think just how long ago World War I happened.
It
And
ended
here we are, the
100 years
100th
ago.
anniversary.
Yeah, it will never happen again. And it's interesting because World War I was the war that most people forgot. Everyone remembers all these other wars, but they don't remember World War I as much, or if they do, they don't really remember what happened. It's the war that kind of changed the name. Like, there's two wars that kind of changed the face of warfare. The American Civil War and the World War I. World War I specifically because it literally happened less than a decade after the Wright brothers first flew their plane at Kitty Hawk. And then we already started seeing planes, and they were testing a lot of these new technologies, which they didn't know what to use yet. Like World War I, they were still charging with cavalry and horses, and then they started saying, hey, let's try out motorcycles, let's try out bicycles. They had like pedal wheel bicycles.
And tanks.
And then it ended with tanks. It was a crazy war that basically changed the name of the game. And
It was definitely the most steampunk of all wars so far.
I think you're using the term wrong.
That's always the way I think of it, though. Just this big industry, lots of heavy metal kind of stuff going on, you know? Definitely a crazy time. And warfare, the weirdest method of warfare, trenches? Can you imagine that? That must have been absolutely hellish.
Yeah, we saw models of the trenches at the museum. It was kind of crazy to see that this is where they were living. But, you know, trenches were also started during the Civil War, and even, I think, to some extent during the Napoleonic Wars as well. But they basically came to a head at World War I, and that's where we had the concept of no man's land, trying to, you know, take yard by yard every little square inch of the battlefield. And of course, that is the war where the famous Christmas miracle happened. I guess it's around the holiday season, so it's appropriate to say. But the Christmas miracle was the day when the Germans started singing, you know, Silent Night, and then the English replied. And then the Germans waved the white flag, walked over for Christmas tree, and then the two decided to play, you know, football until, you know, the officers demanded they start fighting again. But that was considered one of the biggest miracles to happen in war, where for one day everyone just kind of stopped fighting and there was temporary peace.
They should have just agreed to replace the actual warfare with a football match. That way, you know, you basically reach the same conclusions or whatever, but there's no death.
I have a feeling that in the future
Sudden
something
death,
similar
maybe, but
will be that.
Not
yeah.
actual death.
And I guess speaking of stuff in the news, we also just came off of a very heated election.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. How are you feeling? Because I'm in Florida. I just moved to Florida, which is a swing state, but...
Well, Florida's kind of screwed up right now, isn't it? They're not quite done working their stuff out.
Yeah, I'm living in Tallahassee right now, and the mayor of Tallahassee was running for governor, and there's a lot of crazy controversy happening with that, but...
Wait, that guy was the mayor of Tallahassee?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He didn't really have to move that far if he wanted. He would just probably move the block from City Hall.
Which one is the mayor? Who is it?
Andrew Gillum.
Okay, yeah, so the Democratic candidate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was an interesting election. It didn't really turn out the way I think a lot of people were expecting, the hashtag blue wave thing. Didn't really see that. It was more kind of even, but Democrats have taken control of the House of Representatives, so there's a bit more balance in Congress now. To me, the most interesting stuff, I like looking at local elections too, like in Washington. I really like paying attention to the ballot measures and that kind of thing. But still, probably the most interesting thing so far is just all this stuff happening with Florida, where they're having to do recounts now. Basically, it came down to this one county which has a history of weird electoral polling anomalies that is still counting. And so what seemed like settled races for both the governor's seat and the Senate seat are now still up in the air. And it's just kind of like, wow, what's going to happen?
My previous home state, where I just moved out of, Texas, had an interesting election as well. It was a very, very close swing to blue.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
With Beto winning.
O'Rourke versus Cruz. That was interesting too.
Canadian Ted Cruz.
Canadian Ted Cruz, yeah.
Yeah, so the Texans voted for a Canadian over a guy who drops the F-bomb.
Yes,
during
on
his
live
concession
TV.
Speech. It's funny.
Hey man, that makes him hip and cool.
It makes him seem more like
people.
a Texan than the Canadian, I'm going to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, Canadian would be like, you do that and then you immediately apologize afterwards.
Like, sorry, eh?
Sorry.
I'm sorry about that. even though he lost, he definitely, I think, kind of took national stage, and a lot of people are thinking he might be one of the front runners for the Democratic nomination for president.
Right, join the
2
club,
years.
though. They're saying that about so many people now.
I don't think Hillary's coming back. I heard.
Oh, no.
I don't think she's coming back. I heard Bernie wants to make another run, but he definitely does not have the party behind him.
He's also very old.
Yeah, he switched from independent to Democrat for the previous one, then he quickly switched back to independent right away.
I think that was a big mistake.
Yeah, I don't think the Democrat Party is going to back anyone who keeps on switching parties like that.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Warren, the other one, is another potential contender. But yeah, I guess with the 2016 election, I guess it's fair to say most people did not expect the results the way they were. And that was also the election where I think we had the most apathetic voting. Most people thought, hey, it's obvious who's going to win. Our vote doesn't really matter. And that election just did the opposite. It proved voting is important. So you can see for this year, in comparison, everyone's more ramped up to ignore the, early pollings, ignore the early poll results, and just, vote, and down to the last minute. And even now, after the election's over, there's still volunteers out there recounting ballots, looking for new ballots, contacting absentee voters to see if they got their ballots counted and whatnot.
Yeah, crazy times.
Yeah, I think that is mostly it for this minute. Anything else you have to say?
Nope, I think that'll probably do it right there. We can leave it there. All right, guys, so we're going to wrap up this episode of Zootopia Minute. If you did enjoy the podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give our video a like as well. We definitely appreciate that. You can follow us on Twitter at Zootopia Minute, like us on Facebook. And if you have anything you'd like to say to us at all, anything you want to let us know, you can always send us an email to zootopiaminute@gmail.com. All right, guys, once again, thanks so much for listening, and we will see you on the next one.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.